Before everyone says I ruined my own relationship, just let me explain. Yes, I joked that I'd pick his coworker over him. Yes, I said it because his coworker makes $180,000 a year. Yes, I said my boyfriend might as well be homeless compared to that. But it wasn't meant to be serious. It was sarcasm. I swear I didn't think he'd actually pack my entire suitcase and tell me to leave. I'm sitting on the floor right now staring at this suitcase. It's stuffed and zipped, every corner perfectly pressed down, like he spent actual time making sure it closed properly. My boyfriend is standing above me, and he's holding my phone charger like it's some kind of final piece of evidence in a trial I didn't know I was part of. He drops it into the front pocket of the suitcase without saying a word. Not a single word. And my voice cracks when I try to speak. It was a joke. I didn't think it mattered. But apparently it did. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss what happens next. Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's watching from. Now, let's get back to how everything fell apart. It all started over something so stupid. We were talking about money, bills, rent, his job, the usual stuff couples argue about when they're stressed. He mentioned that he might not get the promotion he'd been waiting for. Not a definite no, just a maybe. And I was frustrated. I'd been frustrated for weeks, honestly. We were behind on everything. The credit card was maxed. We couldn't go out. We couldn't do anything fun. And I know that's not entirely his fault, but in that moment, it felt like it was. We'd been sitting at the kitchen table for maybe 20 minutes, going through bills. The electric bill was overdue. The internet bill was coming up. We owed money on the car. Every piece of paper he pulled out of that manila folder felt like another weight being added to a pile that was already too heavy to carry. And I could see it in his face. The tiredness, the defeat, the way his shoulders slumped just a little bit more with each bill he looked at. I watched him run his hand through his hair, something he only did when he was stressed. He did it 3 times in those 20 minutes, and each time I felt this little twist in my chest. This guilt that I immediately pushed away because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that I was part of the problem. That my spending habits, my expectations, my constant complaints about not having enough were adding to his stress. But I didn't want to think about that. I wanted to think about how unfair it was that we were in this situation. How unfair it was that other people our age were going on vacations and buying new furniture and not having to check their bank account before ordering a pizza. I wanted to blame something, someone, and he was sitting right there, and I should have been supportive. I should have told him it was okay, that we'd figure it out, that money wasn't everything. But I wasn't thinking about being supportive. I was thinking about the fact that I'd had to skip buying new work clothes because we couldn't afford them. I was thinking about the fact that my friends were going on vacation, and I had to lie and say I was too busy to go because I was too embarrassed to admit I was broke. I was thinking about the fact that his coworker, this guy he talked about sometimes from the office, had just bought a new car, a nice one, the kind I'd never even get to sit in, let alone own. His coworker. That's who I'd been thinking about for weeks, if I'm being honest. He'd mentioned him in passing a few times, mentioned that he'd gotten promoted, mentioned that he'd bought a house, mentioned that he was taking his girlfriend to Europe for 2 weeks. And every time he mentioned it, I felt this ugly little seed of resentment growing in my chest. Why did his coworker get all that? What made him so special? And why was I stuck here, with someone who worked just as hard but had nothing to show for it? I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. But that's what I was thinking. And once those thoughts started, they didn't stop. They grew. They festered. They turned into this constant background noise in my head that I couldn't shut off. Every time we had to say no to something because we couldn't afford it, I thought about his coworker. Every time I looked at my bank account and saw the negative balance, I thought about his coworker. Every time my boyfriend came home exhausted from a 10-hour day and still had nothing to show for it, I thought about his coworker sitting in his nice car, driving to his nice house, with his nice salary and his nice life. And I hated it. I hated thinking that way. But I couldn't stop. So I said it. I said it too loud, too fast, without thinking about how it would land. Honestly, your coworker makes $180,000 a year. You're like, basically homeless compared to him. The second the words left my mouth, the room changed. It got colder. He stopped moving. He was holding a mug of coffee halfway to his lips, and he just froze there like someone had hit pause on him. I could see his jaw tighten. His eyes didn't leave me, but they weren't looking at me the same way anymore. It was like I'd become something else to him in that single moment, something he didn't recognize. And instead of apologizing, instead of backtracking, I doubled down. Because that's what I do. I laugh when things get uncomfortable. I make it worse by trying to make it funny. If he asked me out for $50, I'd go. I'm kidding. Relax. I even nudged his shoulder like we were still playing around, like this was all still part of some joke we were sharing. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just set the mug down on the counter, slow and deliberate, and walked away. No yelling, no slamming doors. He just left the room. And that's when I should have known. That's when I should have stopped. But I didn't. I followed him into the hallway, talking fast, trying to fix it with more words. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously. You know I don't mean I'd actually sleep with him or anything. Come on. Don't be like this. But he was already gone. Not physically. He was still standing right there in front of me. But emotionally, he'd already left. I could see it in the way he looked past me instead of at me. I could hear it in the way he said nothing at all. That silence was worse than any fight we'd ever had. If he'd yelled, I could have yelled back. If he'd argued, I could have defended myself. But he gave me nothing. Just blank, cold distance. The next few days were torture. He stopped talking to me. Not in an obvious way. He'd still answer if I asked him a direct question. He'd still say good morning. But the warmth was gone. The little jokes we used to share. The random touches when we passed each other in the kitchen. The way he used to ask me about my day. All of it just stopped. He started closing himself off completely. He'd come home from work, go straight to the bedroom and stay there. When I knocked on the door, he'd say he was busy or tired. When I tried to sit next to him on the couch, he'd get up and move somewhere else. Not dramatically, just quietly. Like I was someone he was trying to avoid without making a scene. I remember one night in particular. It was maybe 3 days after the joke. I'd made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. But I'd tried. I thought maybe if I did something nice, something normal, he'd soften up. He came home late, after 8, and I'd already set the table. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses of water, like we were a normal couple having a normal dinner. He looked at the table, then at me, and something flickered across his face. Something I couldn't read. Then he said, very quietly, "I already ate." I knew he was lying. I knew he hadn't eaten. But I didn't push it. I just stood there watching him walk past the table I'd set, past the dinner I'd made, straight into the bedroom, and I heard the door close. Not a slam. Never a slam. Just that soft, final click that somehow felt worse than any yelling match we'd ever had. I ate alone that night. Both plates of pasta, actually, because I didn't know what else to do with the food. And the whole time I kept thinking, this is ridiculous. He's being too sensitive. It was just a joke. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew it wasn't just a joke. I knew it the moment I said it. I knew it by the way my stomach dropped right after the words came out. But admitting that would mean admitting I'd hurt him on purpose. Or at least that I'd been careless enough not to care if I hurt him. And I wasn't ready to admit that yet. I told my best friend what happened. I thought she'd take my side. I thought she'd tell me he was being too sensitive, that he needed to lighten up. But when I explained what I said, she went pale. We were at a coffee shop sitting outside, and she literally put her cup down and stared at me. You called your boyfriend homeless and told him you'd pick a guy at his work who makes 6 figures. She said it like she couldn't believe it, like I'd just confessed to something unforgivable. He knows it was sarcasm, I said, defensive. He knows me. He knows I joke around. I didn't mean it literally. But even as I said it, I didn't believe myself, and I could tell she didn't either. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Do you actually think about leaving him? Like, for real? No, of course not. Then why would you joke about it? I didn't have an answer for that, so I changed the subject, talked about work, talked about the weather, anything to get away from the look she was giving me. That disappointed, concerned look that made me feel like I was being judged, like I was the bad guy in a story I thought I was just narrating. Things got worse at home. He stopped asking me to help with anything. We used to split the bills together, sit down once a week, and figure out what we owed and who was paying what. It was annoying, sure, but it was something we did together. A boring adult thing that somehow felt like teamwork. But now he stayed up late at night, sorting through paperwork alone at the kitchen table. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to get water and find him there, hunched over spreadsheets and bank statements, a calculator beside him, his face lit by the cold glow of his laptop screen. When I asked if he needed help, he'd just shake his head and keep working. I've got it, he'd say. And his voice was so flat, so emotionless, that I didn't know how to respond. Like I wasn't capable. Or like he didn't trust me anymore. He stopped inviting me to things too. His coworker was having a birthday dinner. He didn't mention it. I only found out because I saw the text on his phone when he left it on the counter while he was in the shower. The message said something like, "See you Saturday at 7. Can't wait," with a bunch of excited emojis. When he came out, I asked him about it. Casual, like I wasn't hurt. "Oh, you have plans Saturday?" He looked at me for a second, then shrugged. "Yeah, work thing. Can I come?" "I didn't think you'd want to." That stung, not because I even wanted to go to some random coworker's birthday dinner, but because he didn't even ask. He'd already decided for me. He'd already written me out of that part of his life. And I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, "Of course I'd want to go. I always want to be with you." But we both would have known it was a lie. Because the truth was, I probably would have complained about going. I probably would have been on my phone the whole time, bored, waiting to leave. And he knew that. He knew me better than I wanted to admit. And then I made it worse. Again. We were sitting at the table one night, eating in silence. I'd picked up takeout because I didn't feel like cooking, and neither of us had said more than 5 words to each other since he got home. The silence was suffocating. It pressed down on me like weight on my chest, and I couldn't stand it. I needed to fill it with something. Anything. So I tried to make conversation. And somehow, stupidly, I brought up money again. "If you made even half of what your coworker does, we wouldn't be struggling like this." I didn't even say it meanly. I said it like it was just a fact, like I was stating something obvious. But the second it came out, I knew I'd done it again. I'd pushed him further away. He didn't react. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just looked at me for a long, cold second, then stood up and walked to the bedroom. I heard the door close. Not a slam, just a soft, final click. I sat there alone, staring at my half-eaten takeout, wondering how I'd managed to say the exact wrong thing twice, and wondering why I couldn't just keep my mouth shut. The next day, I came home from work and saw him in the bedroom. At first, I didn't understand what he was doing. He was moving around slowly, deliberately, like he was working on a project. And then I saw it, my clothes, folded, stacked, organized, my makeup bag zipped and placed on top of a pile, my shoes lined up neatly by the closet door, my documents, my passport, my birth certificate, my social security card, stacked in a folder. And all of it was going into my suitcase. I stood in the doorway, frozen, watching him pack my entire life like he was preparing for a trip I didn't know I was taking. His movements were careful, methodical. He folded each piece of clothing like it mattered, like he was handling something precious even though he was clearly trying to get rid of it, or get rid of me. I watched him pick up one of my sweaters, the blue one he'd always said he liked on me. He held it for just a second longer than the others, and I thought, maybe he'd change his mind. Maybe he'd remember us. Remember all the good times. Remember that we used to be happy. But then he folded it, neat, perfect, and placed it in the suitcase with everything else. He'd even separated my things by type, clothes in one section, toiletries in another, shoes wrapped in plastic bags so they wouldn't dirty the clothes. It was more organized than I'd ever packed for myself, and that somehow made it worse, made it more final. Like he'd thought about this, planned it, decided that this was really happening and he was going to do it right. "What are you doing?" My voice came out louder than I meant it to, panicked, desperate. He didn't stop. He didn't even look at me. He just kept folding, kept packing, kept moving with this eerie calm that made my stomach twist. "What does it look like I'm doing?" he said quietly. Are you kicking me out? Are you serious right now?" He finally stopped. He turned to face me, and his expression was so blank it scared me. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. "You want the man who makes $180,000 a year," he said, his voice flat. "Go be with him." "I didn't mean that. I was joking. You know I was joking." He zipped the suitcase. The sound of the zipper closing felt like a door slamming in my face. "You joked about it twice. You joked about me being homeless. You joked about leaving me for someone who makes more money. You joked about how if he offered you $50, you'd go out with him. So go." "Those were just words. I didn't mean any of it." "Words matter," he said simply. And then he grabbed the suitcase handle and started dragging it toward the door. I followed him, crying now, my voice breaking with every word. "Please, please don't do this. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any of it. I swear I didn't." My voice was breaking. Tears were streaming down my face. I reached for him, but he stepped back, keeping distance between us. "Please," I said again, "I'll change. I'll be better. I'll never say anything like that again, I promise. Just please don't do this." But even as I said it, I could hear how empty it sounded. How many times had I promised to be better about other things? Promised to stop complaining. Promised to be more grateful. Promised to stop comparing our life to everyone else's. How many promises had I already broken? He must have been thinking the same thing because his expression didn't change, didn't soften. He just stood there, holding that suitcase, looking at me like he was looking at a stranger. "I love you," I said desperately. "Don't you know that? I love you." "No," he said quietly. "You don't, because if you loved me, you wouldn't have said those things. You wouldn't have made me feel like I'm not enough. You wouldn't have joked about leaving me for someone with more money." "It was just a joke." "It's never just a joke." His voice rose for the first time. Not yelling, but louder, firmer. "It's never just a joke when it's the same joke twice. When it's the same complaint every week. When it's the same look in your eyes every time I tell you I can't afford something. It's not a joke. It's how you really feel." And he was right. God help me, he was right. I didn't have anything to say to that. No defense, no argument. Because he'd just said out loud what I'd been thinking for months. What I'd been trying to hide. What I thought I could keep buried under jokes and sarcasm. But you can't hide how you really feel. Not forever. Not from someone who loves you. Because they see it. They feel it. Even when you think you're being subtle. "You called me homeless," he said softly. "So go find a home with someone else." And then he closed the door. I heard the lock click. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the door, my suitcase at my feet, mascara running down my face because I'd started crying before I even realized I was crying. I knocked. I begged. I tried the handle, but he didn't open it. I called him. No answer. I texted him. No response. I sat on the floor outside the apartment for an hour, hoping he'd open the door, hoping he'd change his mind, hoping this was all just some nightmare I'd wake up from. But he never did. Eventually, I picked up my suitcase and left. And you know what the worst part is? I actually thought about messaging the coworker. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I reached out to him, something would happen. Maybe he'd feel bad for me. Maybe he'd take me out. Maybe I could prove to my boyfriend that I wasn't serious, that I didn't actually want this guy. So I messaged him. I kept it casual, friendly. I said something like, "Hey, I know this is random, but do you want to grab coffee sometime?" He didn't respond. I waited a whole day. Then I called him. The call rang twice, and then went to voicemail. He'd rejected it. My stomach dropped. I tried one more time, and this time I got a text back. "I don't think that's a good idea." That was it. That was all he said. And I realized, sitting there staring at my phone, that he probably knew. My boyfriend probably told him what I said. Or maybe the coworker just wasn't interested. Either way, the fantasy I'd stupidly joked about didn't exist. It never existed. I told my friends what happened. I thought they'd be on my side. I thought they'd tell me he overreacted. But instead, they looked at me like I was the problem. "You pushed him too far," one of them said. "What did you expect?" said another. Even my mum, when I called her crying, said, "Sweetheart, you can't say things like that to someone you love, even as a joke." At work, people heard about it somehow. I don't know who told them, but they knew. And they laughed. Not to my face, but I could hear them whispering. I could see them smirking when I walked by. One girl from accounting actually said something to me in the break room. "So I heard you're single now." She said it with this fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Yeah," I said, stirring my coffee way too aggressively. "That's tough. What happened?" I didn't answer. I just walked out. But I could hear her laughing with someone else as soon as I left. I ended up dragging my suitcase to a friend's place. She let me stay on her couch for a few days, but even she was distant. Like she didn't really want me there, like I was an inconvenience. She'd come home from work and barely say hi. She'd make dinner for herself and not offer me any. And I got it. I wasn't her responsibility. But it still hurt. I remember lying on that couch the first night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her moving around in her bedroom. I could hear her on the phone with someone, laughing, living her life. And I was just there, a guest, an unwanted guest taking up space in her living room. The couch smelled like fabric softener and someone else's laundry detergent. Everything about being there felt foreign, wrong, like I was living in someone else's reality and couldn't figure out how to get back to my own. My suitcase sat in the corner, still zipped because I was too tired to unpack it. And every time I looked at it, I remembered him packing it. The way his hands moved so carefully, folding each shirt, each pair of jeans, like he was handling something that mattered, even though he was literally getting rid of me. That hurt more than anything else. The fact that even when he was done with me, he still treated my things with more respect than I'd treated him. I started going through my phone, scrolling through our old photos. There were hundreds of them. Pictures from trips we'd taken when we had money. Pictures from random weekends when we didn't. Pictures of us laughing, kissing, holding hands. Pictures of a relationship I'd somehow convinced myself wasn't good enough. In one photo, we're at a park. He's mid-laugh, looking at me like I'm the funniest person in the world. I don't even remember what I said to make him laugh like that, but I remember feeling happy, feeling like we were enough, like we didn't need anything else. When did that change? When did I start looking at him and seeing everything he wasn't instead of everything he was? I think it was gradual. So gradual I didn't even notice it happening. One day I was happy, and the next I was comparing him to everyone else. To my friends' boyfriends, to celebrities, to people I didn't even know. And somewhere in there, his coworker became the standard I measured him against, the standard he'd never meet. It rained that first night. I walked to her apartment in the rain because I couldn't afford an Uber, and I didn't want to wait for the bus. My suitcase got soaked. My mascara ran down my face in black streaks. My hair stuck to my forehead. I looked like a disaster. I felt like a disaster. And the whole time, all I could think about was what he said. "You called me homeless, so go find a home with someone else." I whispered it to myself as I walked, the words circling in my head like a curse I couldn't shake. I didn't mean it. It was just one joke, but he made sure I'd never forget it. And I won't. I know I won't, because every time I close my eyes, I see that suitcase. I see him folding my clothes with that calm, detached efficiency. I see the door closing. I hear the lock clicking into place. People keep telling me I did this to myself. They keep saying I should have known better, that I shouldn't have joked about something so hurtful, that I crossed a line I didn't even know existed until it was too late. And maybe they're right. Maybe I did ruin everything. Maybe I pushed him too far, too many times, and he finally decided he'd had enough. But here's the thing. Nobody seems to understand. I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think words could do that much damage. I thought we were solid. I thought he knew me well enough to know I didn't mean it. I thought love was supposed to be stronger than a stupid joke. I thought wrong. Now I'm staying on a couch that isn't mine, in an apartment that smells like someone else's life, wearing clothes that still smell like the home I don't have anymore. And every night, I replay that moment in my head. The moment I said he was basically homeless. The moment I laughed and said I'd go out with his coworker for $50. I replay it, and I wish I could take it back. I wish I could rewind time and swallow those words before they ever left my mouth. But I can't, and he made sure I'd know exactly what that feels like. Because now I'm the one who's homeless, and he's the one who's finally free. I keep thinking about the way he looked at me when he closed that door. There was no hatred there, no rage, just exhaustion, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long and finally decided to put it down. And that something was me. I was the weight he couldn't carry anymore. I replay our last real conversation over and over. The one where I said, if he made even half of what his coworker did, we wouldn't be struggling. I remember thinking I was just being practical, just pointing out facts. But I see now that every time I brought up his salary, every time I compared him to someone else, I was chipping away at something. At his pride, at his sense of worth, at the foundation of us. I didn't see it happening because I didn't think those things mattered. I thought what mattered was that I came home to him every night, that I said I loved him, that I was physically there. But I wasn't really there, was I? Not in the way he needed me to be. I was there with my complaints, with my comparisons, with my jokes that weren't really jokes. My friend asked me the other day if I'd take it all back if I could, if I'd go back to that moment and keep my mouth shut. And I said yes. Of course I would. But then she asked me something that made me stop. Would you actually change, though, or would you just not say it out loud? I didn't have an answer for that, because the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if I would have stopped thinking those thoughts. I don't know if I would have stopped comparing him to other men, to other salaries, to other versions of what I thought I wanted. I just know I would have kept those thoughts to myself. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe he knew that. Maybe that's why he left. He didn't leave because of one joke. He left because the joke revealed what I actually thought. What I'd maybe always thought but never said out loud until I got too comfortable and let it slip. I see his coworker sometimes when I drive past their office building. I saw him last week, actually. He was getting into his car, laughing on the phone with someone. He looked happy, unbothered, like he had no idea he'd become the reason my relationship imploded, Or maybe he did know and just didn't care. I wanted to roll down my window and yell at him, tell him it was his fault for making so much money, for existing, for being the comparison I couldn't help but make. But that would have been crazy, and it wouldn't have been true. It wasn't his fault. It was mine. I'm the one who couldn't appreciate what I had. I'm the one who kept looking at what everyone else had and deciding it was better. I'm the one who turned love into a competition my boyfriend didn't even know he was losing. I miss him. That's the worst part. I miss the way he used to make coffee for me in the morning without asking. The way he'd put his hand on my back when we walked through a crowded room. The way he'd listen to me talk about my day, even when I could tell he was exhausted from his own. I miss the way he'd leave me notes, stupid little notes on post-its stuck to the bathroom mirror. Have a great day, or don't forget you're amazing, or sometimes just a badly drawn smiley face. I used to roll my eyes at them, thought they were corny, childish, but now I'd give anything to find one of those notes again. I miss the way he'd defend me. If someone said something rude to me, he was the first one to step in. He never made a scene, never got aggressive, but he made it clear that nobody was going to disrespect me while he was around. And I took that for granted. Took him for granted. I miss the way he'd pull me close when we were sleeping. Even in his sleep, he'd reach for me, pull me against his chest, like some unconscious part of him needed to know I was there, safe, with him. I don't have that anymore. Now I sleep alone on borrowed couches, and nobody reaches for me in the dark. I miss the way he'd surprise me with small things, not expensive things. He couldn't afford expensive things, but thoughtful things. A book he thought I'd like. My favorite candy bar when he stopped for gas. A flower he picked from someone's garden on his way home from work because it reminded him of me. I called him homeless, and he was the one bringing me flowers. I took all of that and crumpled it up because I wanted more. Because I thought more money meant more happiness. Because I thought the life we had wasn't enough. I know what people think when they hear this story. They think I'm shallow, gold-digging, materialistic, and maybe I am. Maybe I've always been, and I just didn't want to admit it. I thought I was being practical. I thought I was being realistic about what it takes to survive in this world. But practicality isn't supposed to hurt people. Realism isn't supposed to destroy relationships. I didn't just joke about leaving him for someone richer. I told him he wasn't enough. I told him that his value as a person, as a partner, as a man, was directly tied to the number on his paycheck. And when you tell someone that enough times, even as a joke, they start to believe you actually mean it. And I think, deep down, I did mean it, not in a malicious way, not in a way where I was planning to leave, but in a way where I'd already checked out emotionally and didn't even realize it. I'd already started ranking him against other men. I'd already started keeping score. I wonder if he knew that before I said anything, if he could feel it in the way I touched him, or didn't touch him, in the way I talked about the future, or avoided talking about it, in the way I looked at him when I thought he wasn't paying attention. Maybe that's why he didn't fight for me. Maybe he'd already seen this coming and was just waiting for me to finally admit it out loud. And when I did, when I joked about choosing his coworker, he didn't get angry because he was surprised. He got quiet because he was proven right. I saw him last month. Just once. I was at a coffee shop near our old apartment and he walked in with someone. A woman. She was pretty, normal pretty. Not Instagram model pretty, just real life, actual pretty. She had brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a sweater. Nothing special. But the way he looked at her was special. And he was smiling at her the way he used to smile at me, before I ruined it. They didn't see me. I was in the corner, half hidden behind my laptop, pretending to work. And they went straight to the counter. I watched them order, watched her laugh at something he said, watched him touch her arm lightly, affectionately, the same way he used to touch mine. My hand started shaking, I gripped my coffee cup so hard I thought it might crack. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen there, watching this scene play out like I was watching a movie about my own life, a movie where I'd been written out and replaced with someone better. She said something, and he threw his head back, laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in months, maybe longer. Had I ever made him laugh like that? I must have, right? In the beginning, but I couldn't remember. I could only remember the weight of our silences, the tension at the dinner table, the way I'd roll my eyes when he talked about work, the way I'd sigh when he suggested we stay in instead of going out because we couldn't afford it. They got their coffees and sat down at a table by the window. The sunlight hit her face and she looked so content, so at ease. Like she wasn't worried about anything, like being with him was enough for her. I wondered if she knew about me, if he'd told her. I had a girlfriend who called me homeless, who said she'd leave me for a guy who makes more money, who made me feel like I'd never be enough. Or maybe he didn't tell her. Maybe he'd buried that chapter completely and was starting fresh with someone who didn't carry all that baggage. Someone who looked at him and saw someone worth loving, not someone worth comparing. I left before they saw me, packed up my laptop, threw my coffee away even though it was half full, and walked out the back exit like a coward, like someone running from a crime scene. And in a way, I was, because seeing him happy without me felt like proof of what I'd already known but didn't want to admit. I was the problem, not the money, not his job, not his coworker, me. I still think about texting him sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep and I'm lying on whatever couch I'm currently crashing on. I think about reaching out, apologizing again, begging him to give me another chance. I've written the text 100 times, never sent it, but I've written it. I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. I was wrong, about everything. I see that now. I miss you, I miss us. I miss who we were before I ruined it. Please talk to me. Please let me explain. Please let me try to fix this. But every time I get close to sending it, I stop. Because what would it change? Would he suddenly forget what I said? Would he unhear the words that destroyed us? Would he stop seeing me as the person who valued money more than him? No, he wouldn't. And I don't blame him. I've thought about showing up at his apartment, just knocking on the door and forcing him to listen to me. But that would make me look desperate, crazy. And maybe I am both of those things, but I don't want him to see it. I want him to remember me as someone who made a mistake, not someone who turned into a stalker when faced with consequences. So I don't text. I don't call. I don't show up. I just sit here in the wreckage of what I destroyed and try to figure out how I became this person. This person who throws away love because it doesn't come with a 6-figure salary. I never thought I was that shallow. I really didn't. I thought I was practical, smart, realistic about what it takes to survive in this economy. But practical people don't destroy their relationships over jokes. Smart people don't say things they know will hurt someone they claim to love. Realistic people don't confuse net worth with self-worth. And yet, that's exactly what I did. I made him feel like he was only valuable if he could provide a certain lifestyle. Like his love, his loyalty, his kindness, his support. None of that mattered if it didn't come with a hefty paycheck attached. I reduced him to a number. And when that number wasn't big enough, I joked about trading him in for someone with a bigger one. What kind of person does that? But what would I even say? I'm sorry I made you feel worthless. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you until you were gone. I'm sorry I thought money mattered more than the person who loved me. All of it sounds hollow. All of it sounds like something someone says when they finally realize what they lost. And maybe that's because it is. I didn't lose him because of a joke. I lost him because of who I was when I made that joke. And the scariest part is, I don't know if I've actually changed. I don't know if I'm sitting here regretting what I said, or just regretting that I got caught saying it. I see couples now and I wonder if they do this too, if they compare, if they keep score, if they joke about leaving when things get hard, and if they do, I wonder if they'll end up like me, alone, dragging a suitcase through the rain, whispering apologies to someone who's already moved on. People tell me I'll find someone else, that I'll learn from this, that this was just a lesson I needed to learn the hard way. But it doesn't feel like a lesson. It feels like a punishment. And maybe I deserve it. Maybe I deserve to sit here and think about what I had. To replay every moment I took him for granted. To remember every joke I made at his expense. To feel the weight of every comparison I drew between him and someone I thought was better. Because he wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the person who stayed with me when I was broke and struggling, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who loved me even when I was difficult to love. And I threw that away because I thought a bigger salary was worth more than loyalty, than love, than him. I didn't just lose a boyfriend, I lost the last person who saw something in me worth fighting for. And the worst part is, I proved him wrong. I proved that I wasn't worth it, that his co-worker's money was more important to me than his heart. I called him homeless. I told him I'd leave him for $50 and a man with a better job, and he believed me. Not because he was insecure, but because I gave him every reason to believe it was true. Now I'm the one who's homeless, living on couches, moving from place to place, carrying everything I own in a suitcase he packed for me, with more care than I ever showed him. And he's free. Finally, completely free. Free from my jokes. Free from my complaints. Free from the girl who looked at him and saw a paycheck instead of a person. I thought love was supposed to be enough. But I guess it's only enough if you actually have it. And somewhere along the way, I stopped loving him for who he was and started resenting him for who he wasn't. For what he couldn't give me. For the life I thought I deserved that he couldn't provide. I didn't deserve him, and he finally figured that out. That's what I think about when I'm alone now, when I'm staring at the ceiling in someone else's apartment, wearing someone else's borrowed blanket, listening to sounds that aren't familiar, smelling air that doesn't smell like home. I think about the moment he closed the door, the moment the lock clicked, the moment I realized I'd gambled everything on a joke and lost, and I whispered to the darkness, the same thing I whispered that night in the rain. I didn't mean it. It was just one joke, but he made sure I'd never forget it. And I never will, because some jokes aren't funny. Some words can't be taken back, and some people, once they're gone, are gone forever. He gave me what I asked for. I wanted someone who made more money. So he gave me nothing. He gave me the space to find that person, to chase that dream, to learn what it's actually like to have everything and nothing at the same time. And now I know. Now I understand. Money doesn't keep you warm at night. A paycheck doesn't hold you when you're crying. A salary doesn't forgive you when you mess up or believe in you when you fail. He did all of that, and I called him homeless. So now I am. And he's not. And that's exactly what I deserve. I keep coming back to that suitcase, the way he packed it, the care he took even when he was throwing me out. That says something about him, doesn't it? That even in his anger, even in his hurt, even when he was done with me completely, he still made sure I had everything I needed. He could have just thrown my stuff in garbage bags, could have left it outside the door in a mess, could have made it ugly and cruel. But he didn't. He folded every piece of clothing. He organized everything. He made sure I had my documents, my charger, my makeup, everything. He took care of me even when he was getting rid of me. And what did I do? I called him homeless. I joked about leaving him for someone richer. I made him feel small when he was already struggling. I kicked him when he was down and then acted surprised when he finally had enough. I thought love meant staying. I thought as long as I was physically present, that was enough. That I could say whatever I wanted, think whatever I wanted, as long as I came home at the end of the day. But love isn't just staying. It's how you stay. It's the words you choose, the way you look at someone, the way you make them feel about themselves. And I failed at all of that. I made him feel worthless, and then I acted shocked when he decided to find worth somewhere else. I wonder if he thinks about me. Probably not. He's moved on. I saw that at the coffee shop. He's building a new life with someone who probably doesn't spend her time comparing him to everyone else. Someone who doesn't keep a mental spreadsheet of what he doesn't have. And me? I'm still here. Still on borrowed couches. Still carrying that suitcase he packed. Still replaying every mistake. Still wishing I could go back and be better. But I can't go back. I can only sit here and feel the weight of what I lost. The weight of knowing that I had someone who loved me, who would have done anything for me, and I threw it away over money I didn't even have a right to expect. I threw it away over a joke that wasn't funny. I threw it away over words I can never take back. And now all I have is the suitcase, these borrowed couches, these cold, lonely nights where I reach for someone who isn't there and remember that it's my own fault he's gone. People ask me if I've learned my lesson, if I'd do things differently if I could go back, and I say yes. Of course, yes. But the truth is, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'm actually different now or just scared of being alone. I don't know if I've really changed or if I've just learned to keep my mouth shut. And maybe that's the real punishment, not losing him, but knowing that even if I got another chance, I might just ruin it again. Because the problem wasn't what I said, it was what I thought, it was who I am. And I don't know how to change that, so I sit here, on this couch, with this suitcase, whispering the same words I whispered in the rain. I didn't mean it, it was just one joke, but he made sure I'd never forget it. And I never will. Because some people give you everything they have, and you don't realize it was everything until they stop giving. He gave me his love, his time, his patience, his faith that we could build something together even when we had nothing. And I called it not enough. I called him not enough. And now I have exactly what I deserve, nothing.